June 5th, readings. Irenaeus of Lyons Against Heresies, Chapter 11 on the opinions of Valentinus and his followers. The doctrinal maze of Valentinus. Let's now take a closer look at the confusion among the Valentinians. Even though they all speak of the same themes and use similar terms, their teachings don't align. They contradict each other. Take Valentinus himself, for instance. He reshaped the so-called Gnostic system to fit his own ideas. According to him, everything began with a mysterious pair, a dyad, one member called Auratus, unspeakable, and the other Sige, silence. From this pair came another, named Pater, father, and Aletheia, truth. From these four came four more, Logos, word, and Zoe, life, Anthropos, man, and Ecclesia, church. This group of 8 beings was the original Ogdoad. From Logos and Zoe, 10 more spiritual beings emerged. From Anthropos and Ecclesia, 12 more followed. One of these 12 separated and fell from its original place. This fall, Valentinus says, led to the creation of the rest of the universe. He also spoke of 2 beings named Horos, one of whom stood between the uncreated Bethus and the rest of the spiritual realm, Pleroma, and the other who separated their mother from it. The origins of Christ and the Demiurge. Christ, in this scheme, didn't come from the higher Aeons inside the Pleroma, but was birthed by the fallen mother, motivated by a faint memory of spiritual things. She gave birth to him, but he, being male, separated himself from her and returned to the Pleroma, leaving behind the shadow she had also produced. From her and that shadow came a second son, the Demiurge, whom Valentinus describes as the supreme ruler of the lower world. He also said a secondary power came with the Demiurge, a left-hand power, mirroring the ideas of other so-called Gnostics. And as for Jesus, Valentinus can't even keep his story straight. Sometimes he says Jesus came from Thelatus, another spiritual being, sometimes from Christ, and sometimes from Anthropos and Ecclesia. And the Holy Spirit? Valentinus claims it was produced by Aletheia, and that it quietly entered the Aeons to stimulate them into bearing truth plants, a sort of spiritual fertility. Secundus and the splitting of light and darkness. Another teacher, Secundus, divides the primary Ogdoad into a right and left tetrad, calling one side light and the other darkness. He also changes the story. He says the being who fell and caused the lower world didn't come directly from the 30 Aeons, but from their byproducts. A new height of nonsense. Yet another prominent teacher tries to sound even more mystical. He says there was a being beyond all things called monotes, unity, and that with monotes existed a power named henotes, oneness. Together, these didn't give birth to anything distinct from themselves, but from within they produced an unbegotten invisible mind called the monad. With the monad came another power, hen, the one. From these, monotes, henotes, monad, and hen, came all the other spiritual beings, satirizing the absurdity. At this point, Irenaeus mocks their wild imagination. You, fo, the kind of groan you'd expect in a tragedy. Look at the sheer nerve it takes to invent names like monotes, henotes, and hen. These terms didn't exist before, they were just made up on the spot. It's as if truth was nameless until this one man came along to label it. And why stop there? If we're free to invent theological names, Irenaeus says, then let's do it properly. Imagine a supreme proarch, a royal being that exists in all directions. With it exists a being named Gourd. Alongside the Gourd is a power called utter emptiness. Together they bring forth the cucumber, visible and delicious. With the cucumber is another power, the melon, and from these arise all the delirious melons of Valentinus. If nonsense is allowed, at least let it be familiar. More varieties of speculation. Still others have even stranger names for their spiritual beings. They say the original Ogdoad consists of proarch anenoitos, incomprehensible, auratos, unspeakable, auratos, invisible. From each of these comes a second being, archeakataleptos, inaccessible, anonomastos, nameless, agenetos, unbegotten. These 8, they say, make up a perfect pleroma. They even claim this group came before Bythus and Sige, as if they were more perfect than the perfect, wiser than the Gnostics themselves. To such people, Irenaeus exclaims, O ye trifling sophists! Not even their central figure, Bythus, is agreed upon. Some say he has no consort and is beyond gender. Others say he's both male and female. Still others insist he has a partner named Sige. Their system is so self-contradictory that it collapses under its own weight. Augustine of Hippo Confessions, Book 10, Chapter 16. The privation of memory is forgetfulness. Remembering forgetfulness. When I say the word forgetfulness and I know what I mean by it, how do I know that, unless I remember it? I don't mean simply the sound of the word, but the thing itself. If I had truly forgotten what forgetfulness was, then when I heard the word, I wouldn't know what it referred to. So when I remember memory, that's straightforward. Memory is present to itself through itself. But when I remember forgetfulness, both are now in play. Memory because I remember, and forgetfulness because it's what I'm remembering. But that raises a paradox. What is forgetfulness except a lack of memory? So how can I remember something that, by its nature, causes me to forget? If I remember something, it means I still retain it in memory. But if I truly forgot it, then I wouldn't be able to remember it. Still, I do understand what forgetfulness is, so it must somehow be stored in memory. It's present there, so that I won't forget it. And yet, when it is present, we do forget. This leads to a strange conclusion. Maybe forgetfulness doesn't dwell in memory directly, but only through a kind of image. Because if forgetfulness itself were fully present in memory, it would wipe the memory clean, causing us to forget, not remember. But who can truly sort this out? Who can fully understand what's happening here? Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, Part 1, Question 79, Article 1. Whether the intellect is a power of the soul? Objection. Some argue that the intellect is not a power of the soul, but rather something separate, like a substance of its own. They say that if it were truly a part of the soul, it would die when the soul dies. But because the intellect can understand eternal and universal truths, it must be immortal and separate from the soul's powers. Responsio, here's how I see it. I hold that the intellect is indeed a power of the soul, not a separate thing floating free of it, but rooted in the human soul itself. But it's not just any kind of power. It's the highest and most spiritual power in the soul, because it doesn't need the body in the same way other powers do. Let me explain. In us, the soul has many powers. We sense, we imagine, we move, we grow, we nourish, and we understand. Some of these powers, like seeing or hearing, need a bodily organ to work. But understanding, true intellectual knowledge, doesn't come through the body in that same way. It starts with sense experience, yes, but it goes beyond it. Think of it this way. When I understand something like justice or triangularity, I'm not just thinking of a triangle I saw or a court ruling I read. I'm grasping something universal, something not tied to a single place or object. That means my intellect isn't chained to any specific bodily organ. That's what makes it spiritual. But here's the key. Just because it works spiritually doesn't mean it's separate. The human soul is one thing with many powers. And among those powers, the intellect stands at the top. It's the part of the soul that reaches furthest, to truth, to God, even to the eternal. So I say the intellect is a power of the soul, just a spiritual one, not a bodily one. That's why it survives death, and why it's different from sensation or memory. Quick summa, I affirm that the intellect is a power of the human soul, a spiritual power that doesn't rely on the body in the way other powers do. It is not a separate substance, but the highest faculty of a rational soul.